We continue now at the top of Daf Gimel Amud Aleph and Meseches Eruvin. This is Eruvin Daf 83a. Now, for this particular Amud, there's a lot of arithmetic, a lot of mathematics, so we're going to be going back and forth between a document I have created, which will make this Amud a lot simpler to learn. So the Gemara starts off with a brisa here. Tana, it was taught in a brisa, v'chatzi chatzi chetzia. Half of a half of a half of this loaf that we're talking about in the Mishnah, letame tumas ochlin, is the amount that creates tumas ochlin. Now, generally, the amount that creates tumas ochlin is going to be about an egg. Take a look at the document here I created. We'll see exactly what we're talking about. So just going back to review the Mishnah said that Rabbi Yochanan held that the loaf of bread, which you're going to be using for the Shitufei Mavos, is a quarter of a kav, and that represents 2 meals. We said that really it was a half a kav, but half of it goes to the storekeeper, so it's really a quarter of a kav. Now, a kav itself is 24 eggs. So since a kav is 24 eggs, this loaf is therefore going to be 6 eggs. That means that there are 6 eggs make up 2 meals. And if you do the math, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it comes out there are going to be, every kav is going to have 8 meals per kav. Right? If you're going to have 2 meals is a quarter of a kav, so if you have a full kav, it's going to be 8 meals. Rabbi Shimon, he said that the loaf that we're talking about is a third of a kav, and he said that a third of a kav represents 3 meals, so 2/3 of that loaf is 2 meals, but we're cutting the whole loaf in half for the halachas of the Mishnah. But the point is, therefore, the loaf itself is going to be 8 eggs. Again, it's going to be 1/3 of the 24 eggs, which is a kav, so 1/3 of 24 is going to be 8 eggs for the loaf. And then according to Rav Shimon, as we said on the previous Amud, there are 9 meals to a kav, again, because 1/3 of a kav is 3 meals, so if you have the full kav, it's going to be 9 meals. That's what we said on the previous Amud. That was the math we actually finished the Amud with. So now we're going to take a look at each halacha the Mishnah says based on this loaf. So we start off with this loaf of bread. Either this loaf of bread is a quarter of a kav and it's 6 eggs, or this loaf of bread is a third of a kav, which is 8 eggs. That's really all you need to know in terms of the Mishnah. So now take half of that loaf. So half of that loaf we said is considered 1 meal. That makes sense. And that's for the halachas of a house with saras. Again, if you go into a house with saras, your clothing only become tamei in the amount of time it takes to eat a meal, and that's half of the above loaf. Half of that, which is a quarter of a loaf, that's for tumah for a person who eats tamei food. Eat that kind of food at that shear, then you're going to become tamei. That's a tumah d'Rabbanan. And now what we just said was half of that, which is 1/8 of a loaf, is the shear for tumah for food. So if you do the math over here, according to Rabbi Yochanan, you're starting with 6 eggs. You divide by 2. That's going to be the first half. That's going to be 3 eggs. So that's going to be 3 eggs in terms of the tzaras halacha. 1.5 eggs is going to be in terms of the halacha of a person becoming tamei. 0.75 of an egg, 3/4 of an egg, is the tumah food. According to Rabbi Shimon, it starts from 8. So it's 8, down to 4, down to 2, down to 1 egg. Now, all over Shas, it's always 1 egg. You never see this 3/4 of an egg. So if you take a look at Tosfos, you'll see that Tosfos addresses that. Tosfos says, "V'chatzi chatzi chetzi l'tami tumas ochlin akulu tanoi koi." This goes on both tanoim. Kin mefarish b'kuntrus, like Rashi explains. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka kid islay dahainu kebetza chatzer revia. According to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, it's going to be, as we just said, 3/4 of an egg. Ul Rabbi Shimon kebetza shleim. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's going to be a full egg. V'hadamer b'chol duchta kebetza l'tami tumas ochlin. The statement that's made throughout Shas that it's an egg is the amount for tumas ochlin. Hainu Rabbi Shimon. That statement that's made all over Shas is follows Rabbi Shimon v'lo Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. I will just point out there is a big machlokas rishonim. What does it even mean that a kibetza is the shear for tumas ochlin? There's a little bit of a question: is it to receive the tumah, to conduct the tumah somewhere else? That's a separate machlokas rishonim. We're not even going to get into over here. It's not even mentioned over here, but that's a separate machlokas rishonim. But in any case, for tumas ochlin, it's a kibetza. And here, Tosfos is pointing out that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, at least according to Tosfos, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka says it's not even actually a kibetza; it's actually 3/4 of an egg. So that's what chatzi l'tami tumas ochlin means. So the Gemara now says, "V'tana didan my time lo tani tumas ochlin." So why doesn't our Tana, why doesn't our Mishnah have this tumas ochlin shear of about an egg? And the Gemara says, "Mishum de lo shavish shiurayu lahadadi," because the truth of the matter is that the shiurim are not exact. They don't actually come out exact. Rashi says it means the lo shavish shiurayu lahadadi lo have shear tumas ochlin chatzi shear psul gavia mitzumtzum. If you take half of the preceding shear, half of the psul gavia shear, it actually doesn't come out exactly to half. There are different Tanaim have different shiurim, which we're about to say. We're about to see a bunch of different shiurim on all these things. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, kama shir chatzi pras. What is the shear of a chatzi pras? Now, chatzi pras actually refers to the halacha right here, a quarter of a loaf, because half of a loaf is considered a pras. That was for the halacha of tzaras, and half of that, that's a chatzi pras, that's a quarter of a loaf. So again, we have seen so far that the shear for a chatzi pras is either 1.5 eggs or 2 eggs. Now we're going to see a bunch of opinions on that issue. So kama shir chatzi pras, what exactly is the shear of a chatzi pras? First opinion, beis beitzim chaser kima. It's actually 2 eggs, but subtract just a little bit. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. You see here, it's a little bit off. Rabbi Yossi says beis beitzim shochakos. It's actually 2 large eggs. Again, slightly different shear. Shear Rebbe, beis beitzim viod. Rebbe's shear was, it's 2 eggs and a viod, and a little bit. Kama viod, what is that little bit? Echad me'esrim. It's 1/20th bebetza of every egg. Every egg you have to add on a 20th. We're going to see when we go to the document. Not going to be Rashi inside. There's actually a different opinion. Rashi has 2 opinions what this viod means. May have been a different gears in the Gemara. Here it says 1/20th. In any case, those are the shiurim for the chatzi pras. Now, let's take a look at the shiurim for Tumas Ochlin. V'ilu gabe Tumas Ochlin, Tanya, when it comes to the shiur for Tumas Ochlin, which we know is going to be about an egg, it says as follows. Rabbi Nasan v'Rabbi Dosa amru, Rabbi Nasan and Rabbi Dosa, they say, Kebeitza sha'amru kamoa uklipasa. When we talk about an egg, it means the egg plus its shell. The Chachamim amrim kamoa below klipasa. The Chachamim say when we talk about the egg, it is actually without the shell. And Rashi over here explains why that's not exact. So first of all, kamoa uklipasa, the egg plus its shell. Alma lo shavi lechatzi shir, the psul gavia. You see right away, it's not going to be exactly half of the preceding shir. The Ilu Rabbi Yehuda chaser kima boy mahavi. They should have used if we were following Rabbi Yehuda, if it was exactly half, you should have had the term chaser kima like Rabbi Yehuda had. V'ilu Rabbi Yossi beitzo klipasa shochakos boy mahavi. According to Rabbi Yossi, you should have had the word shochakos because he said specifically large eggs. V'ilu Rabbi viodos boy dehainu tvei. And if you're following Rabbi, where's the viod? You should have had the term viod. You don't have any of these things. You see that it's not exactly half. And then, according to the other opinion, below klipasi, you measure the egg without a shell. Nami zuter tvei. That's actually too small. Even from whatever shear you look at, even Rabbi Yehuda's shear, whatever shear you're going to look at, again, Rabbi Yehuda's shear was that you subtract a little bit from the 2 eggs, but this is much smaller because here you're subtracting an entire shell. So again, it's not exact. It's a little smaller than a half. I'll take a look at the document over here to see what we mean over here. Again, first you have a machlokas tanoim about what a quarter of a loaf is. Rabbi Yehuda said 2 eggs minus a bit. Rabbi Yossi said 2 large eggs. Rabbi said 2 eggs plus a bit. Now, what is a bit? So we're going to have 2 opinions on that. What we read in the Gemara, Rashi's one version in Rashi is 1/20th of every egg, 1/20th of each egg in the mixture. So it would actually come out to be 1/10 of an egg because you're adding every egg that's in there. There's 2 eggs. So every egg that's in there, you're adding 1/20th. So it's going to come out to 2/20ths of an egg, which a total add-on of 2/20ths of an egg, which is 1/10 of an egg. Another version in Rashi says that it's actually that the bit is actually 1/40th. Now I actually wrote here 1/40th of an egg. It's actually 1/40th of the total of 2 eggs. That should be 1/40th of 2 eggs. We'll keep that right there. But the other version of Rashi is that it's actually 1/40th you add. But whatever it is, that's the little bit. Just take a look. We'll just see that Rashi, just that little part of Rashi inside over here. Rashi says, V'yesh sheshonim echad mimem beitzim afarshi lebeiz habeitzim tosefes echad mimem. Some people say for the 2 eggs total, you're adding 1/40th. So those are the various opinions on that. That's going to come up a little later in this Amud, whether it's 1/40th or whether it's 1/40th for 2 eggs or whether it's 1/20th per egg. That's going to come up in a mathematical sequence coming up. But in any case, let's now continue. With the Gemara. So the Gemara now continues with a statement from Rafram. Amar Rafram bar Papa Amar Rav Chisda. Rafram bar Papa says in the name of Rav Chisda, Zu divrei Rabbi Yehuda of Rabbi Yossi. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Avol Chachamim Omrim, but the Chachamim say Kebeitza umechza shochakos, that the measurement should be 1.5 eggs using large eggs. Take a look at Rashi first. Zu divrei Rabbi Yehuda hach praisa dechatzi pras delel. When we talked about what's the shear of a chatzi pras, that's those tanoim. But there's another opinion that it's 1.5. And just to read a few more lines in the Gemara, so who is this Chachamim? Uman Chachamim. Who is this Chachamim who say that a Chatzi Pras is 1.5? Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. It's Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Take a look. If you take a look at the back to our document again, Rabbi Yochanan says this right here. That's what we said earlier. Rabbi Yochanan said it starts at 6. So again, 6 eggs was for the loaf of bread itself. Half of that was 3. Half of that was 1.5. That's exactly what Rav Chisda means to say. All Rav Chisda is really saying is you should know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka shear is 1.5 eggs. The Gemara thinks now that's so obvious. Pshita, isn't that obvious? Because we just said that on the top of the Amud. So the Gemara says no. Shochakos asal ashmin, and it's coming to teach us large eggs. We didn't say anything about Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka requiring large eggs. So that's what Rav Chisda is adding. Ki also Rav Dimi Omar. When Rav Dimi came, he said as follows: Shiger bunyas l'Rebbe mudya de kundis de min usa. He said the following story. When Rav Dimi came, he said the following story, that Bunyas sent to Rebbe the measurement of kundis from the usa, v'shia Rebbe moson v'sheva asara beyin. And Rebbe measured, this was a type of sa'ah, and he said that the sa'ah is 217 eggs. One sa'ah is 217 eggs. Just take a quick look here at Rashi. Bunyas was Shem Ha'ish. This was a particular individual that he sent. Mudyo Kundasa Shem Hasa. This was the name of this particular saw. It was this measurement of Kundis. Demin Neusa Meosa Makam. It was from a particular place. Okay, so what we know over here is that Rebbe says that one sa'ah is 217 eggs. Take a look here at the document and we'll see what's going on over here. So the story is that Rebbe measures a saw as 217 eggs. Now, a saw is actually 6 kav. A saw is actually 6 kav, and as we said before, a kav is 24 eggs. 6 times 24 should really be 144. So Rebbe's count here of 217 is contradictory to 144, and that is what the Gemara will deal with now for the next few lines, actually, trying to reconcile Rebbe's number of 217. So the Gemara says, Ha-sa'ah dehecha. What kind of saw are we talking about? There are 3 types of saw. Ida midbaris, if it's what we call a sa'ah midbaris, a saw from the midbar, a saw of the midbar, kuf mem dalet have. So that means literally when they traveled in the midbar, the saw of the midbar, when Klal Yisrael was in the midbar, so that comes out to 144 as we just said. That was the number we said earlier. V'id Yerushalmis. Now, if it's the Yerushalmis, they add a 6th. Now, but it's really called a 6th milavar. It's really adding a 5th. When we say a 6th, what that really means is after you get the total, after you add, it's a 6th of your next total. But in English, we talk about, we don't add a 6th on the total. We add a 6th. We would add from the original number. So it's a 5th. You're going to add 1/5 to 140. You're going to add 1/5 to 144. So V'id Yerushalmis kufayin gimel have. If you add a 5th of 144 to 144, it's going to actually be 173, still not making 217. V'ida tziporis, and if it's what we call the sa'ah of tzipori, that's adding another 5th, reish zayin having, that actually only comes out to 207. So 207 is close, but it's not exactly there. Again, so that's what we say here, add 1/5 for the saw of Yerushalmi, that's going to be 173. It still doesn't help, even if he was talking about that kind of saw. Add another 5th for the saw of tzipori, that comes out to 207, still not 217. So the Gemara still needs to find a little bit extra to understand where Rebbe got 217 eggs in a sa'ah. So the Gemara now says, Liolam de tziporis. Really it is the saw of tzipori. I see chalsa shadi alayu. Add on the amount for chala, because he wasn't counting that he had separated chala. Now chala is 1/24. Chalsa kamahavi, and if you do 1/24 of that total, how much is it going to be? Tamne, it's going to add 8. So again, going back to the document over here. So if you add challah, which is 1/24, add 8 to 207, again 1/24 of the 207, you're going to get 215. So we're getting very close to 217, but not quite there at 217. So that's what the Gemara says. Akati batzerla, you're still a little bit short. So the Gemara says, Ela aisi va'odos de Rebbe, shadi alayu. So you know what you need to do? You need to add on the va'ods, add on that little bit. Remember, Rebbe says that when we measure these eggs, it's the eggs plus a little bit, and that's what the same Rebbe who we're sending to over here, Bunyas was sent to Rebbe to do this measurement, he adds a little bit to every egg. So if you're adding a little bit, you're actually going to get, instead of 215, you're going to get to 217. Gemara says it's actually too much. Isn't that going to be a little too much? Kaven de lo have a kibetza, since it's not more than a whole egg extra, lo chashiv le, we don't count that. And here I'm just going to look at the document, because again, there's 2 versions of what these va'ods were. So there's 2 ways of learning this. The first version is you're going to add 1/40th for every 2 eggs, which adds about 2.5, and it gets you to 217.5. That's if you do that. That would be adding to the 215. So you're going to have 215 and just add a 40th for every 2 eggs. That gets you to about 217 and a half, adds about 2.5 eggs. The version 2 is drop the 8 of challah. Forget the 8 from the challah, so let's go back down from 215 back down to 207, and instead add 1/20th to every egg. So if you add 1/20th to every egg, it ends up being a little more. It ends up being that you're adding a little more than 10, because you could see that from 207, you're basically adding a tenth there. Basically, it's 200. It's more or less 200. So you're adding 1/20th, so you're basically adding about 10. So 207 plus a little more than 10 is 217 plus a little more than 217. Again, the same thing. You're slightly over 217, but since it's not more than an eggs amount, so we're not makvid on that little difference. And that is how Rebbe measured out that a sa'ah was 217 eggs. So he's going by the sa'ah, to short version, he's going by the sa'ah of tzipori. Depending on your version of Rashi, he may also be adding challah into that count, and then also adding the va'ods. Gemara now continues with the Brisa. Tanur Rabbanan, we learned in a Brisa. Sa'ah Yerushalmis Yisera al Midbaris Shasus. The Sa'ah of Yerushalayim was more than the Sa'ah of the Midbar by 1/6. And again, the way we phrase it, that's really 1/5, because you're taking the Sa'ah of the Midbar and adding 1/5 of the Sa'ah of the Midbar to it. They call it 1/6 because after you get after you get the total, what you've actually added would be 1/6 if you look at it as a fraction of the total that you've summed to. V'shel Tzipori Yisera al Yerushalmis Shasus. The same thing. Tzipori is 1/6, which in English, what we would call it again, is 1/5 more than the Yerushalmi saw. Nimtzis, now this line is what we're going to try to interpret almost to the bottom of the oven. Nimtzis shel Tziporis Yisera al Midbaris Shlish. It comes out that the Sa'ah of Tzipori is 1/3 more than the Sa'ah of the Midbaris. This is very difficult to understand what this line means. Take a look at the math as it should be worked out. The Brisa says that the Tziporis is 1/3 more than the Midbaris. How so? The Midbaris itself, we said, is 144 kav. The Tzipori, we said, not kav, that should be 144, I'm sorry. That should be 144 eggs. And the Tzipori, we said, is 207, right? That's what we set up here on the top over here as we were going through the math. Add another fifth, it's still only 207 eggs. So it's still not eggs. So what's going on? So if the Midbaris is 144 eggs, the Tzipori is 207, the difference there is 63. So now, a third of 144 is 48, a third of 207 is 69. So no matter what we take the third of, it's not equaling 63. So that's why the Gemara is going to try to figure out what does that line mean in the Brisa. Okay, so again it said, Shel Tziporis Yisera al Midbaris Shlish. Shlish deman, a third of what? Ilema Shlish de Midbaris. Let's do a third of the Sa'ah Midbaris. Michti, Shlish de Midbaris Kamahave. What is a third of the Sa'ah of the Midbar? Arboin Utmani. As we just said, a third of 144 is 48. Vilu Outfa Shisunu Slas. But the difference really between a Midbaris and a Tziporis is 63. Viela Shlish de Yerushalmis. Let's try Shlish of Yerushalayim. Shlish de Da Kamahave Chamshin Utmania. Nechet Lasa. That's about 52. Subtract a third again. V'ilu odfa shisin utlas. This is 63. That's not going to work either. V'ela de tzipori. Let's try a third of tzipori. Shlishti da kama have. What is a third of tzipori? Shivin nechichada. That's 69, as we said when we looked at the document. V'ilu odfa samech gimel. That's the closest one, but it's still a difference of 63 instead of 69. So how is this going to work? So the Gemara is going to present two answers to understanding this line in the Brisa. Elamar Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Gemara says, rather Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Hachi Kamar, here's what it means. Nimtza Sa'ah shel Tzipori, Yisera al Midbaris, Karov l'shlish shela. It's about, if you take about a third of the Tzipori, that's about the difference, which is like what we said, 63 versus 69. And then it says, Ushlish shela, also you should know that 1/3 of the Tzipori, Karov l'mechza de Midbaris, is close to half of Midbaris. Take a look at the document, you'll see what he's saying. Rav Yirmiyah answers that the Tzipori is about 69 more eggs than Midbaris. It's really 63, but 207 divided by 3, that 1/3 of the Tzipori is 69. It's about 69 more, about a third more, even though it's really 63. And also 144 divided by 2 is about 69, because again, 144 divided by 2 is actually 72, and that's close to 69. So that's Rav Yirmiyah's answer to what the line in that Brisa really meant to say. Ravina doesn't like this answer. Ravina asks, Midi Karov Katani. Does anything in this Brisa talk about things being close to one another? That's not what the line says. If you look at just to look at the actual line, Nimtzis Shel Tziporis Yisera al Midbaris Shlish. Comes out that it's more by a third. It doesn't say anything about that at all. So So Ravina doesn't like this answer. So Elam Ravina. So the Gemara says, rather Ravina says as follows. Hachi Gamar. Here's how you understand this line. Nimtzes shalish shel tzipori biva'odios shel Rebbe. If you take 1/3 of the tzipori saw, but you also add on the va'ods of Rebbe, so you got to add on those. Yisera al mechza shel midbaris shalish beitza. That's going to be if you take half of the midbaris, it's just going to be 1/3 of an egg more than that. Take a look at the document here of Ravina's answer. Again, 1/3 of tzipori if you add a little bit of Rebbe, meaning get to that 217 number. That was Rebbe's 217 with the v'ots. Remember, Rebbe measured the saw as 217 eggs. So if you take 217 divided by 3, it's about 72.3. And as we said, half of the midbaris was 72. There you go. That's that slight difference. That's Ravina's answer to what the brisa means. If you take, again, the 1/3 of the Rebbe's tzipori, and then you take that and measure it against half of the midbaris, that's where your numbers are going to almost line up. Gemara now continues with the brisa. Tanur Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa, Reishis arisosechem, take the first of your dough. This is a pasuk by Chala. We'll continue this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis.